What kind of neighbor calls fake cops to shut down a barbecue? The kind who thinks she owns the entire block. That's who. HOA Karen. All 300 pounds of her. Stormed into my backyard that Saturday evening. Her voice sharp enough to cut through the sizzle of burgers on the grill. I was flipping patties, laughing with my old army buddies, when she appeared like a thundercloud, her floral dress flapping like a warning flag. She didn't knock, didn't wave, just barged through the gate, her eyes blazing with that righteous fury only a self-appointed neighborhood tyrant could muster. "This is illegal," she shrieked, pointing at the grill like it was a war crime. Open flames, noise, and God help Medho's men smoking cigars. The men in question, my brothers in arms, all retired special forces, didn't flinch. They just sipped their beers, their weathered faces betraying nothing but faint amusement. HOA didn't know who she was dealing with, and that was her first mistake. I'd moved to this quiet suburban street 6 months ago, craving peace after decades of deployments. The house was modest, the yard perfect for hosting the guys I'd served with, men who'd seen hell and come back laughing. We planned a simple barbecue, ribs, cold drinks, and stories we hadn't told in years. But HOA, the HOA president who lived 3 doors down, had other plans. She'd been watching me since I moved in, her binoculars glinting from her window whenever I mowed the lawn or parked my truck. Notes about my grass length, my mailbox color, my excessive flagpole, they piled up in my mailbox like bureaucratic shrapnel. I ignored them. Big mistake. Apparently. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the folding tables laden with potato salad and coleslaw, HOA's voice hit a new pitch. "I've called the authorities," she declared, hands on her hips. "You can't have an unauthorized gathering like this." I raised an eyebrow, spatula in hand. "It's my backyard. HOA. It's a barbecue, not a rave." My buddy Tom, a grizzled ex-ranger with a scar running down his cheek, chuckled softly. "Ma'am, you might want to take a breath," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. HOA ignored him, her face reddening as she dialed her phone with theatrical flair. I figured she was bluffing until 2 men in cheap, ill-fitting police uniforms pushed through the gate behind her. The air shifted. My buddies, all in their 50s and 60s, didn't move, but I could feel their instincts kick in, the kind honed in deserts and jungles. The cops looked wrong, badges crooked, radios silent, boots scuffed like they'd been pulled from a thrift store. One of them, a lanky guy with a mustache that screamed, "Rent a cop," cleared his throat. "Sir, we've had complaints about noise and fire hazards. You need to shut this down." I set the spatula down, wiping my hands on my apron. "You got a warrant?" I asked, keeping my tone even. The second cop, shorter and sweating through his polyester shirt, glanced at HOA, who nodded vigorously. That's when I knew these weren't real police. Tom leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "You boys got names. Badges we can see up close." The lanky one stammered, clutching his fake radio. HOA, sensing the hesitation, doubled down. "Do your job." She snapped at them. "Arrest these people." That's when Mike, a former Green Beret who'd once disarmed a bomb with a pocket knife, stood up. At 6'4", with a beard like a Viking's, he was a walking deterrent. "HOA," he said, his voice low. "You sure you want to play this game?" She froze, her bravado flickering. The backyard was silent now, save for the crackle of the grill. My buddies were watching, waiting. Their calm a coiled spring. The truth started to unravel when the shorter cop accidentally dropped his badge. It hit the grass with a cheap plastic clatter, revealing a logo that looked like it was printed off a home computer. I picked it up, holding it to the light. "This says Security Solutions, LLC," I said, tossing it back to him. "You're not cops. You're hired muscle." HOA's face went from red to purple, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The lanky guy backed up, muttering about a misunderstanding. My buddy Dave, who'd spent 20 years in counterintelligence, stepped forward, his phone already recording. "Let's get some names," he said, his tone conversational but deadly. "Who hired you? And don't leave me friends here, don't take kindly to liars." HOA's plan was crumbling, but she wasn't done yet. She spun on me, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're untouchable because you've got your little army friends. This is my neighborhood. I make the rules." That's when the twist hit. The kind of thing you couldn't make up. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Ellison, a sweet 80-year-old who baked cookies for the block, had been watching from her porch. She shuffled over, her cane tapping the ground, and pointed a trembling finger at HOA. "You sent those fake cops to my grandson's birthday last month, too," she said, her voice quaking with anger. "Scared the kids half to death." The backyard went still. Even my buddies, who'd seen it all, looked stunned. HOA wasn't just targeting Mesh, was waging a one-woman war on anyone who dared enjoy their own property. The revelation lit a fire. Mrs. Ellison's words hung in the air, and I could see the gears turning in my buddies' heads. They weren't just defending my barbecue anymore. This was personal. HOA had crossed a line, terrorizing an old lady and kids for the sake of her petty power trip. Tom stepped closer to the fake cops, his voice dropping to a growl. "You two better start talking, or we're calling the real police." The lanky one cracked first, spilling that HOA had hired them through a shady security company, promising a quick buck to enforce HOA rules. The shorter one nodded, sweat dripping down his face. "She said it was legal," he blurted. HOA's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was none. She was surrounded by men who'd faced down worse than her and come out on top. The standoff reached its peak as the sun sank below the horizon, casting the backyard in a tense twilight. HOA's fake cops were backing toward the gate, their confidence shattered. But she wasn't ready to surrender. "You can't prove anything," she bellowed, her voice cracking with desperation. She lunged for the lanky guy's arm, as if dragging him back would save her scheme. That's when Mike, the Green Beret, stepped in front of her, his presence like a wall. "Ma'am, you're done," he said, his words carrying the weight of a man who'd stared down warlords. HOA flinched, her bravado crumbling under the collective gaze of my buddies, each one a living testament to discipline and grit. The fake cops didn't wait for her orders, they bolted, their fake badges clattering as they fled through the gate. HOA stood alone now, her empire of complaints and intimidation collapsing around her. I could have let it end there. But this wasn't just about my barbecue. It was about Mrs. Ellison's grandson, about every neighbor HOA had bullied into submission. I turned to Dave, who was still recording. "You got enough?" I asked. He nodded, his eyes gleaming. "More than enough." We had HOA's hired goons on video, confessing to her scheme. We had Mrs. Ellison's testimony, a damning piece of the puzzle. And we had the badge, a pathetic plastic relic of her failed power grab. HOA's face twisted with rage. But there was fear there too. The kind that comes when you realize you've picked a fight you can't win. "You'll regret this," she hissed, jabbing a finger at me. But my buddies closed ranks, their silence louder than her threats. Tom spoke up, his voice steady. "Hoa, you've got two choices. Walk away and stop harassing people, or we take this to the real cops and the HOA board." Her eyes widened. The HOA board, her precious throne, was her weakness. Dave had already dug into the bylaws during a break in the grilling, and he'd found a clause about misuse of authority. HOA's stunt with the fake cops wasn't just unethical, it was grounds for removal. She knew it, too. Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her like air from a punctured tire. The collapse was swift. By Monday, Dave had sent the video to the HOA board, along with a signed statement from Mrs. Ellison and half a dozen other neighbors who'd come forward with their own stories of HOA's tyranny. The board called an emergency meeting, and HOA was stripped of her presidency in under an hour. She tried to fight it, screaming about due process and slander. But the evidence was ironclad. The fake cops, tracked down through their shoddy security company, confirmed everything, desperate to avoid charges. HOA's reign was over. Her name a cautionary tale whispered over mailboxes and front porches. She stayed in her house, curtains drawn, her binoculars gathering dust. But the real victory wasn't just HOA's downfall, it was what came after. That next weekend, I threw another barbecue, bigger than the last. Mrs. Ellison brought her grandson, a shy kid with a gap-toothed smile, who ran around with a water gun, laughing for the first time in months. My buddies showed up, of course, but so did the neighbors people HOA had scared into silence. They brought casseroles, beers, stories of their own. The backyard hummed with life, the grill smoking, the air thick with the scent of ribs and redemption. Tom raised a glass, his scar catching the firelight. "To freedom," he said, and we all drank, even Mrs. Ellison, who sipped her lemonade with a grin. Looking around, I saw what we'd done. We hadn't just stopped HOA. We'd rebuilt something she'd tried to destroy. Community. Trust. The simple joy of a summer evening with people who cared. My buddies, those retired warriors, didn't need medals or missions to make a difference. They'd done it right here, in a suburban backyard, with nothing but their presence and a few choice words. And me, I'd learned that peace wasn't just the absence of conflict. It was the courage to stand up, to fight for what mattered, even if it was just a barbecue. HOA thought she could control us, but she'd met an army she couldn't bully, one forged in battles she'd never understand. The neighborhood was ours again, and as the stars came out, I knew we'd keep it that way.